Welcome guys to this new video on my channel. In this video we'll discuss two trades that I took on Aave last week. Those two trades were based on price action and statistics, and those two things will be discussed in this video. Let's get back on the charts. If we zoom out on the 4-hour chart, we can see that last week, so this is the price action of last week, was bearish, and that bearish bias was also created by this break of structure to the downside of that previous week. So if we have this in mind, that bearish break of structure to the downside, we also know that these lows were created on the weekend, and those lows are acting as a draw on liquidity. So we want to see price pushing over there. Market makers are going to push the price to these lows eventually. So with that in mind, my bias for the week was bearish. If we then zoom out on the 1-hour chart, we can also see that these highs are getting swept over and over again, creating this ultimate high on Monday. And we know that if we make a high on Monday or a low on Monday, that can act as a strong weekly high or weekly low for the rest of the week. So we created that high on Monday, and that acted as a strong high to hold for the rest of the week. If we are looking at that structure, we can see that this high is getting swept by this high is getting swept by eventually this high, and this high is bringing us to that low over here. And we can also see that we are making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, and here we are making a lower low compared to the low we created over here. So that means that we are breaking the uptrend, we're breaking to a downtrend. As we can see over here, this candle over here, that was opening and closing under this low over here. So we have a confirmed break of structure to the downside, and now we can look for shorts. So we now need to look for an entry, and that's where I zoomed out on the daily, and we can see that we are trending to the downside. And on Friday we left a very big imbalance because we opened it Saturday over here. So this over here was our imbalance. This was the imbalance. When we are creating that imbalance, I often tend to use the 50% fill of that imbalance, because price is often in a bearish trend to the downside or bullish trend to the downside, but in this case a bearish trend to the downside. We are creating a bearish imbalance. Why? So what I often do is I look for the 50% of that imbalance, and we can see over here that I draw that on Monday, and then I saw that it was getting filled on the 1 hour and it got touched again, and that's also where I entered. So this is where I entered. I didn't want to put my stop loss above the weekly high. Why? Because on Monday it didn't have the best statistics giving us a high probability to hold this high. So I put my stop loss above the monthly high because that high had a high probability of holding, and I shorted all the way down to the low we made on Friday, and we can see that it played perfectly. This was not the only position I took on Aave that week. We also performed in an add-on, and that is what I'm going to explain right now. So we're now in my channel in the Tribe Capital Discord, where I shared the explanation, which I'm now gonna share with you guys. If you wanna get more information like this, you can always join the Discord, and I have a link in my bio. So if you're interested, you can also always join. We now got a special deal that we are offering 14 days of free trial for only $1. So I will say it's a steal. But I shared the statistics over here, and this is something I have not shared on my channel. As we can see over here, we have the key insights on the current day for Aave. So this was, I think, on Wednesday last week. And here you have the time statistics and the distance statistics. Over here you can see that we had a 10.5% probability that we were going to take out the daily high on that day. And over here we have only a 27.7% probability that we're also going to take out the daily high. So both probabilities were decently bearish. Why? We created a high on that day and we created a low on that day, and the high had a very low probability of getting swept again. And if we are looking at the two boxes underneath that, we can also see that we have a 83.5% probability and a 97% probability that we we're going to make a new P2. What does that mean? A new P2 means either a new high or a new low, but in this case that we know we have a low probability of creating a new daily high, we can say that the P2 that we are going to form that day is a new daily low. So that's also a bearish signal for me. You can also see for the current week on Aave, so that's last week, we also had decent probabilities of holding the weekly high. So again, bearish confluence. So we know that this high over here, based on the statistics, has a high probability to hold. And we also know that the weekly statistics are becoming pretty bearish. So we're now looking at a price action structure to hop in a short position add-on for Aave. As we can see over here, this is pretty interesting structure. We can see that this high is getting swept by this high, and this high is bringing us to this low that is getting swept, and people are seeing this as a breakdown. Sweeping this low over here, people are thinking that price is going to be lower because they think that this is a valid breakout structure, but it is not. It's a fake breakout structure, and it's engineering liquidity above these highs over here. This high is getting swept eventually by this high, and we know if we want to see a confirmation to hop in a position, we know that the low that brings us to that higher high compared to the high that brings us to that low over here, that low is significant to break. We can also see that this low over here is getting swept over here, and we can see that this candle is opening and closing underneath that low. So here I was hopping into a short position with stops above the daily high. Why? This high has a high probability to hold, and we know that the low is not probably in yet, and also the weekly low is still not in yet. So if you are now zooming out on the weekly, on the 1 hour I mean, we can also target that low over here as we did on the other position that we have open. And also what I always do with an add-on is that I also tighten my stop loss of the first position to the stop loss of my add-on. That means that I risk less on the first position and I can risk more on the add-on. This was the end of the video. I hope you learned a lot. If you didn't understand something in this video, you can always comment with a question down below and I will answer it. And I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.